Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. I'm Andrea.M. and today we are back to Real Crime International. So welcome if you've never been here before. It's lovely to see you, and thank you to all my new subscribers who joined in the last week and to all of my returning subscribers. You all mean so much to me because without you, I'm not here. So thank you all so much. So before we get into today's case, and it is a very interesting one, and it might be one you haven't heard of, but it is linked to an extremely famous British homicide case. And you'll know what I'm talking about when I begin. But before we start all that, if I could ask you guys, if you're not subscribed yet, to please consider subscribing to the channel, as it helps me out in my quest to get my first 1,000 subscribers. And that means I can join the partnership program and finally get a few more perks for me and some for you to do with the channel and to be able to grow here on YouTube. So that's why I'm always so grateful and so thankful when I get new subscribers joining the channel, because you guys are helping me out, and I feel like we're all doing it together here and that we're all part of a little family, which is how I kind of want my channel to be. I'd like to think of everybody who supports me and supports the channel as like a little family. And I'll be so excited when I get to my first 1,000 subscribers, because that means memberships, it means I can make merch, it means I can do things and offer you guys more, so that it makes us all feel like a little bit more of a community. So that'll be great. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. Without further ado, let's get into it. And today we are exploring the Thames Torso homicides, because YouTube doesn't really like us to use the word that starts with M to describe these things, so I'm going with homicides. But if you've been here before, or you're a true crime fan, you know what the word means. So today we are looking into a very old case, the Thames Torso homicides. So the Thames Torso homicides, they are also often called the Thames Mysteries or the Embankment homicides, were a sequence of unsolved homicides of women occurring in London, England from 1887 to 1889. So today, again, we are leaving Australia and we are heading across the pond to England. Now, if this is starting to ring a bell for you, yes, these homicides were committed at around the same time another famous series of homicides was being committed in nearby Whitechapel. And if you are thinking, is this about Jack the Ripper? In a roundabout way, it is, and we're going to get to that as this case progresses. As I said, it's a very interesting case. It's also very old, but I just felt this week I wanted to go with something a little more historic. And I just went looking for unsolved homicides in Britain. And I was really surprised when the Thames Torso homicides was actually the first thing that popped up, because what I was thinking was, oh yeah, it's going to be Salty Jack. No, it is the Thames Torso homicides. So that was interesting for me right off the bat. That's what prompted me into wanting to do this for this week. I was going to try and actually do an Oz-Files video, but it was also while I was looking for something for that I found these. So I do have something in mind for an Oz-Files video as well, and it'll be coming later in the week. So stay tuned. So this series of homicides included 4 incidents which were filed as belonging to the same series. None of these cases have ever been solved, and only one of the 4 victims was identified. In addition, other murders of a similar kind, as we just said, were taking place between 1873 and 1902 and have also been associated with the same homicide series. So speculations have linked the Thames homicide series to that of the contemporary Whitechapel homicides involving Jack the Ripper, or Salty Jack, or Shifty Jack, whatever they wanted to call him. However, the modus operandi of the perpetrator of the Thames torso homicides differs from the other unidentified criminal that the victims of Jack the Ripper suffered. And what that means is Jack the Ripper's modus operandi and the Thames torso killer had different methods that they used in the homicides of their victims. So this gets a little bit descriptive, so I'll just throw that little warning in there. If you're familiar with the Ripper case, though, you'll know what to expect. If you are not, this gets a little bit icky, so if you want to just along a couple of minutes, feel free. So the unidentified victims of Jack the Ripper suffered progressive abdominal and private area mutilation, whereas the Thames torso murderer dismembered the bodies of his victims. So, okay, they're saying, and it'll keep coming up as I progress in this case, that because the modus operandi of Jack and the Thames killer were different, they don't think that they're connected. But my way of thinking, and this is just my mere speculation, but I know many of you are probably thinking the same thing, would it not be a possibility that the Ripper and this man could be the same guy? Could the Ripper have changed his modus of operandi, or the method by which he does this, to throw the police off the scent, to think maybe it was committed by somebody else? Or, as there has been explored with the Jack the Ripper case, with the two killers, did they have a falling out? Did they go their separate ways? Is this guy an associate of Jack's? Was he a friend of his? Maybe even, and I hate to say this, somebody he was mentoring, maybe a younger person. It's very interesting when you start thinking about all the different possibilities that could arise in these historical cases, especially one as famous as Jack the Ripper. So they used to call these four the canonical four, and what they meant by this was canonical in this case is a series that conforms to a similar general rule or set of circumstances. It is also a biblical term which does refer to an original canonical four, referring to the four apostles, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, four apostles and four homicide victims. And all of the victims were women. So I'm wondering if this holds any significance to the killer's identity, or was it just a strange coincidence in this still to this day unsolved case. So I think it was also explored in the Ripper case of whether he may have been a member of the royal family back then, as they used to call him Prince Jack. Even though, like, the royal family, a Church of England, was he interested in the other religions? Was he maybe trying to mock another religion by these four homicides that they actually called the canonical four? So they're just things that I think about and things that interest me, being that I research so many of these cases and these little things pop up in my head. And there have been a lot of cases where they have been, like, the offenders have been moved to these crimes that they commit by religious leanings. So that's another interesting facet that could have been present in this case. Doesn't mean it was, but it's just kind of piqued my interest a little bit. So the series included 4 incidents which were filed as belonging to the same series, as we just said. So the cases that were involved were the Raynham mystery, the Whitehall mystery, the homicide of Elizabeth Jackson, and the Pinchin Street torso homicide. So we'll begin with the Raynham mystery. Between May and June of 1887, the remains of a woman's body were found in the River Thames near Raynham. Workers first encountered a bundle with a torso of a female throughout May and June. Various parts of the same body were found, with the exception of the head and the upper chest area. The investigation concluded that the body had not been dissected for medical purposes, but that a degree of medical knowledge had been necessary to perform the dissection. Now, before I go any further with that, this kind of trickles back towards Jack the Ripper a little bit, because, as we said before, he was known for removing the organs of his victims. Jack was also known for leaving a bit of a mess behind, but it was usually with surgical precision that he would remove whatever body part he seemed to fancy. Don't know how else to put that, but he seemed to fancy at that time. This guy seems to have a little bit of medical precision in the dissection of his victims. So that's sort of making me think again along the lines of, is it the same man, or is this somebody who was in fact being mentored by Jack the Ripper? Interesting to think about. So, as we said, a degree of medical knowledge would need to be necessary to perform a dissection, but because doctors could not state a cause of death, the jury was forced to return a verdict of found deceased. Next came the Whitehall mystery. So what's interesting about the next victim is the area where her remains were discovered. Whitehall is a mere 4.1 miles from Whitechapel, the killing ground of Jack the Ripper. Now, parallels had been explored between the Whitechapel homicides of working girls attributed to Jack. They occurred around the same time in fairly close proximity to each other. And as we said before, the thing that had the police in doubt as to whether Shifty Jack was responsible for the torso homicides was the fact the modus operandi was so different of the second killer. But I'm still thinking, did he do it on purpose to throw the police off? So between the 11th of September and the 17th of October 1888, more dismembered remains of a woman were discovered at 3 different sites in the centre of the city, including, and this is ironic, the future site of Scotland Yard, the police headquarters. The torso was matched by Police Surgeon Thomas Bond to a right arm and a shoulder that had previously been discovered on the muddy shore of the River Thames in Pimlico on the 11th of September. The Times newspaper had initially suspected that the arm was placed in the water as a medical student's prank. They'd have to be kind of morbid medical students to think that was funny, though, you'd think. On the 17th of October 1888, reporter Jasper Waring used a Spitzbergen dog with the permission of the police and the help of a labourer to find a left leg cut above the knee that was buried near the construction site. Elizabeth Jackson was the next victim to be discovered, and remember, she is the only one who's ever been identified. On the 4th of June 1889, a female torso was found in the Thames, and more body parts were soon found in the Thames the next week. The Times reported on the 11th of June that the remains found so far are as follows. Tuesday, a left leg and thigh were found off Battersea. The lower part of the abdomen at Horsley Down. Thursday, the liver was found near Nine Elms. The upper part of Elizabeth's body was found in Battersea Park, neck and shoulders off Battersea. Friday night, the right foot and part of a leg at Wandsworth, left leg and foot at Limehouse. Saturday, her left arm and hand at Bankside. Her buttocks and pelvis were found off Battersea, and her right thigh was found at a Chelsea embankment. And the following day, her right arm and hand at Bankside. So this is pretty, I don't even know how to describe this, like this, whoever it was, has, committed homicide against this lady, and he has proceeded to thoroughly dismember her and then leave her all over the city. Why did he do that? Was it Jack? Was he trying to tease the police? Was he trying to get his case into the news again? Or was it somebody who was trying to become more famous than Jack the Ripper? Interesting things to think about with this case, and the fact that it's never been solved, and neither has the Ripper case. It's very interesting indeed. And there was also a speculation that Jack the Ripper may have left Britain and actually ended up in Melbourne. Did his accomplice or perhaps apprentice follow him and end up out here? So the next thing I'm going to have to do is see if I can find any homicides that happened around that time in Australia that may have a similar MO to this. And if I find anything, you can be sure I'm going to do a video about it. And I'm finding it all very interesting indeed. And this comes to another interesting point in the case. More like an interesting person, and you'll know what I mean as soon as I say his name. So the investigation concluded again that medical knowledge had been necessary to perform such a thorough dismemberment. At the inquest held by Mr. Braxton Hicks, and yes, Mr. Hicks is the son of the famous paediatrician Dr. Braxton Hicks, and we all know what Braxton Hicks are. If you're very young or you're living under a rock, Braxton Hicks actually refers to contractions that are present just before, it's a small period of time before a woman goes into labour when she's going to deliver her child. What happens is a lot of the time, like most of the time, like anybody I've ever known who's had a baby have had Braxton Hicks contractions a week or two or maybe a few days before the baby's about to arrive. It's just, I guess, everything getting ready to do its thing so that the baby can be born. And it was Braxton Hicks, the obstetrician, that came up with that term for false labour pains, is Braxton Hicks contractions. So that's really interesting. And the other thing about his son, Mr. Braxton Hicks, who was the coroner involved with this case, is he was actually a paediatric coroner, and as you'll go on to find, one of the women was actually 8 months pregnant when she was killed. So his expertise would have been needed for that. On the 17th of June, Mr. Hicks stated, "The division and the parts showed skill and design. Not, however, the anatomical skill of a surgeon, but the practical knowledge of a butcher or a knacker." And if you're wondering what a knacker is, it has to do with horses. I'm not going to say any more about that though, because that's upsetting. So he believes it could have been somebody who was a butcher or a knacker. But could the person have been being mentored by somebody else who knew how to perform a dismemberment, and maybe this person didn't quite have his skills up to snuff yet? Another thing to consider. I am really kind of leaning towards it's either it is Jack the Ripper, or there were two Jack the Rippers, or Jack the Ripper was mentoring somebody else and he decided to try his hand at a few homicides at around the same time. And I just find it weird that this was all going on at around the same time as the Whitechapel homicides. Interesting thoughts. There was a great similarity between the condition as regarded cutting up of the remains and that of those found at Raynham and at the new police building on the Thames embankment. The Times of June 5 reported, in the opinion of the doctors, the woman had been dead for only 48 hours, and that the body had been dissected somewhat roughly by a person who must have had some knowledge of the joints of the human body. And this was actually the victim, who was about 8 months pregnant at the time. Not sure if anything was actually done to the fetus, it doesn't say. The doctors would go on to say that they were also at this time unable to establish a cause of death. The jury, however, reached the decision willful murder against a person by persons unknown. Though the head was never found, the victim was identified as Elizabeth Jackson, a homeless working girl from Chelsea. After Elizabeth Jackson came another grisly discovery at Pynchon Street. And guess where Pynchon Street's located? Yeah, you're about to find out. On September 10 of 1889, Police Constable William Pennant found the headless and legless torso of another unidentified woman under a railway arch at Pynchon Street, Whitechapel. Jack the Ripper's stomping ground. Interesting. It seems probable that the murder was committed elsewhere and that the parts of the dismembered body were dispersed for disposal. The woman's torso was found at 5:15 a.m. on Tuesday the 10th of September 1889 under a railway arch at Pynchon Street, Whitechapel. Extensive bruising about the victim's back, hip and arm indicated she had been severely beaten shortly before her death, which had occurred approximately 1 day prior to the discovery of her torso. The victim's abdomen was also extensively mutilated in the manner reminiscent of Jack the Ripper, although her private area had not been touched. The dismembered sections of the body are believed to have been transported to the railway arch, hidden under an old chemise. And if you wonder what a chemise is, it's like a slip or a nightie or something. It's just like a garment that women would wear back then. Despite a search of the area, no other sections of her body were ever found. Neither the victim nor the culprit were ever identified. Chief Inspector Swanson and Commissioner Munro observed the presence of blood within the torso, indicating that the death was not from hemorrhage or cutting of the throat. The pathologists, however, said that the general bloodlessness of the tissues and vessels indicated that hemorrhage was the cause of death. Newspaper speculation that the body belonged to Lydia Hart, who had disappeared, was refuted after she was found recovering in hospital after a bit of a spree. Not sure what they mean by that. Maybe she got out and just got completely maggot, I don't know, but a bit of a spree. So I'm guessing she went on a bender probably. Another claim was that the victim was a missing girl called Emily Barker, and that was also refuted, as the torso was found to be from an older and much taller woman. Swanson did not consider this a Ripper case and instead suggested a link to the Thames torso homicides that were committed in Raynham and Chelsea, as well as the Whitehall mystery. Monroe agreed with Swanson's assessment that the three murders and the Pynchon Street case are suggested to be the work of a serial killer, nicknamed the Torso Killer, who could either be the same person as Jack the Ripper or a separate killer of uncertain connection. Links between these murders and three further murders, the Battersea mystery of 1873 and 1874, in which two of the women were found dismembered, and the 1884 Tottenham Court Road mystery, have also experts on the murders such as Stuart Evans, Keith Skinner, Martin Fido and Donald Rumbelow discounting any connection between the Torso and the Ripper killings on the basis of their different modus operandi. I think they might be basing a little bit too much on that. I honestly think even if he didn't do it, he might have been involved in some way. Munro was replaced as Commissioner by Sir Edward Bradford on the 21st of June 1890 after a disagreement with the Home Secretary Henry Matthews over police pensions. And there were other cases that were associated with the Thames Torso homicides. Outside the four canonical cases, which were filed by the police as belonging to the same series, there were additional cases which have been linked loosely to the Thames Torso murders. So as we just mentioned before, there was the Battersea mystery, and the Battersea mystery is the name given to two unsolved homicides that took place in London in 1873 and 1874. So on the 5th of September 1873, the left quarter of a woman's trunk was discovered by Thames Police Patrol near Battersea. Subsequently, a right breast was found at 9 Elms, a head at Limehouse, a left forearm at Battersea again, and a pelvis at Woolwich, until an almost complete body of a dismembered woman had been found. The nose and chin had been cut from the face, and the head had been scalped. So that's a pretty violent death for this poor lady. So whoever any of these victims are, my heart goes out to each and every one of you, and I'm sorry that you had to die like that. It's pretty bad. Under the leadership of the acting chief surgeon, Metropolitan Police, Thomas Bond, the corpse was reconstructed. The attempts to identify the remains were disturbed by the curiosity of the public, and the police first showed a photograph to any potential witnesses. The Lancet reported, contrary to the popular opinion, the body had not been hacked, but had been dexterously cut up. The joints have been opened and the bones neatly disarticulated. Even the complicated joints at the ankle and the elbow, and it is only at the articulations of the hip joint and shoulder that the bones have been sawn through. So that's a very vivid description, and if I'm making anybody sick right now, I'm sorry for that. But this is sort of leaning towards, again, the fact that this person had to have some medical knowledge or some butchering knowledge to know how to separate these joints and how to so neatly disarticulate them and neatly saw through bone, flesh, cartilage, muscle, all of that. So, you know, you watch movies like Saw and other horror movies and stuff, and the bodies all just come apart really easily. That isn't how it is in reality at all. There's quite a lot of precision needed to actually do this to somebody. So this suggests that somebody knew what they were doing. So the jury involved with the case would pass a verdict of willful murder against some person or persons unknown. Obviously this was a deliberate act. The case remained unsolved in spite, and this was a lot of money back then, so don't laugh when I say the following figure, of a £200 reward being offered for information. This is the 1800s, that would have been quite a substantial amount back then. In June of 1874, the dismembered body of a female was discovered in the Thames River at Putney. The corpse lacked a head, both of her arms, one leg, and had been treated with lime before being thrown in the river. The jury returned an open verdict. The case to this day remains unsolved. Tottenham Court Road and the Bedford Square Mystery. And they are the next cases that follow on to this. The Tottenham Court Road mystery was reported by the Times on the 24th of October 1884, relating to the discovery of parts of a woman's body once again. A skull still with flesh attached to it, a chunk of flesh from a thigh bone, were found near Tottenham Court Road in Bedford Square, and a woman's arm was found in a parcel. This arm had been tattooed, showing that it might have belonged to a working girl. The human torso was found in a parcel by a police constable as he passed 33 Fitzroy Square 5 days later. The parcel was believed to have been placed at the location between the hours of 10 and 10:15. However, it doesn't say if it was placed there in the AM or the PM. I'm thinking probably the PM, because the AM, you know, you'd think somebody'd see you putting that there, so we'll go with PM. Evidence was presented in an inquest on the 11th of November of that year, held at St Giles Coroner's Court. This concluded that the body parts came from a woman and that they might have been divided by somebody who was skilled yet again. But, of course, not for the purposes of anatomy. The inquest resumed on the 9th of December. More evidence was presented and showed how the body was skillfully dissected and came from a female. And this was stated by Dr. Jenkins, who I believe was the coroner. involved in this autopsy. The evidence was the right arm, both feet, and the right forearm of a single individual. These two mysteries also remain unsolved. Now we move on to La Mystière de Montreuil and Lambeth Mysteries. In his 2002 book, The Thames Torso Murders of Victorian London, Michael Gordon suggests there may be a link to a murder in Paris in 1886, as well as to another murder in London in 1902. So we're going a little bit international here. In November of 1886, a woman's torso was found on the steps of the Montreuil Church in Paris, missing the head, legs, right arm, left breast, and her uterus. In June of 1902, a woman's torso was found in Salamanca Alley in Lambeth in London. And once again, no suspect was identified in either case. And as always, the media began to speculate on this case, as we all do. The newspapers suggested a tie to Jack the Ripper's killings that were occurring simultaneously, but the Metropolitan Police said there was no connection. It is debatable whether Jack the Ripper and the torso killer were the same person or separate serial killers active in the same area at the same time. And that is also a possibility. We've seen that in later cases. There have been two serial killers that had no connection to each other whatsoever that were active at the same time in the same area. With this, however, because of the dissections involved, I'm kind of thinking there's a connection there somewhere. I honestly think for myself that the Thames torso killer was probably somebody who was being mentored by Jack the Ripper. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all. Because it was also speculated, was Jack the Ripper in fact a surgeon? And if he was, it's not too far a reach to think that maybe he was also a teaching doctor. He could have been teaching anatomy to people. And maybe one of his students has come to him and said, oh, listen, I've got these urges and things, and he's taken him under his wing. That would not surprise me at all, but as is speculated here, could be just two totally separate guys that were doing this that had no knowledge of each other whatsoever. But I do find it a little bit hard to believe. The modus operandi of the torso killer differed from that of Jack the Ripper, and the police at the time discounted any connection between the two. The Thames torso homicides, of course, became the base for some popular works of fiction over the years, as we've no doubt seen with the Jack the Ripper case. And I'm not sure if I've ever seen any of these movies or anything like that, but they might be worth checking out if you're into that kind of thing. So there was a 1971 film called 10 Rillington Place, which has a scene in which a detective mentions the Thames torso murders to serial killer John Christie. In the opening scenes of The King Came Calling, the 2013 third episode of the first series of the television program Ripper Street. And I have seen Ripper Street, and it was so scary and so amazing. If you can get hold of it, I think it's on iView, probably Acorn TV maybe. You can find it there, but it was a really scary and compelling series. And Ripper Street takes place in 1889. Edmund Reed conducts an experiment to try and discover where Elizabeth Jackson's remains were dumped into the river. And the ambiguity over Jackson's provenance leads to a dispute with Reed's opposite number in the City of London Police. And this person wants jurisdiction over the case. The 2013 novel Mayhem by Sarah Pinborough is based on the Thames torso murders and includes newspaper articles from that time. Some of the characters are based on the people involved with the investigation. And that is where we leave this very grisly part of Britain's history. But I thought it would be interesting to explore because it was so tied up with the Jack the Ripper. I honestly don't know anybody who enjoys true crime or is interested in true crime who doesn't know about Jack the Ripper. that was one of the first cases as I was growing up. As I said, I was a weird child. I was interested in all this stuff that came up that really piqued my interest in true crime. So it did start a long time ago, and it did sort of begin with Jack the Ripper. And it was around that time I was learning about Jack the Ripper that... It's Mr. Louie. Wonder if it can be on camera. He usually doesn't. Come on, you going to come over? Yeah? Come and say hello to everybody. No? I don't know if you all can hear him, but he's he's just woken up. And I'm like, come and say hi. Oh, are you coming over? How are you? You're good. Oh, that's good. Not the usual way to end off a homicide case. I was sitting here talking to my cat. Come on. You going to come be on camera? Come say hello to everybody. I'll see if I can get him. Because you guys haven't seen Louie for a long time. Just give me a minute. Here he is. There's Mr. Louie. He's crabby because he just woke up from a nap. He said, hello everybody, it's me. Oh dear, I won't torture him too much and make him be on camera for too long. But yeah, that's Louie. It says hello to everybody. So where were we? Oh yeah, so it was, it was so nicely interrupted there by my little boy. It was around the time I was kind of getting interested in true crime cases that the Anita Cobby homicide happened. And if you haven't seen my Anita Cobby video, go back and watch it because it's one that really needs to never be forgotten. And yeah, it was around that time I just found out about Jack the Ripper, and then the thing with Anita Cobby happened, that absolute atrocity. And then I was kind of hooked on true crime from such a young age, all the way back then. And I did, even as I was growing up, want to join the police force, but because I had juvenile arthritis in both my knees, and I had asthma, and a few other health problems, I was not accepted into the program at Goulburn because I had too many health problems, and if you've got bad knees and asthma, you can't chase down a perpetrator. So I was rejected, but that was okay. I've been an armchair detective ever since. And that's why I do these videos on YouTube, because it's always been an interest. I like to be a voice for the victims, especially the ones that aren't identified. And especially for cases that do go back so far, because these women had nobody to speak for them back then. Probably nobody even cared, you know. And as I was actually having a conversation with one of my subscribers the other day, the police don't seem to care about working girls. And we all know what I mean by that. I'm not going to say the other word because it's horrid. And I don't want to ever use that word again, to be honest. But, you know, working girls that have had life deal them a really bad hand, and they've gone into this profession because they just feel there's no other way out. They can't get a job. They can't support themselves. And in a lot of these countries, the government doesn't help much. And, you know, people, they have to feed themselves. They have to live somewhere. And these poor women were just doing what they could to try and survive, and it led to their deaths. And nobody cares about them. I mean, apart from Elizabeth Jackson, these other poor women have never been claimed. They've never been laid to rest properly. That's not to say Elizabeth Jackson was. I'm not sure if she had a family or not. But I like to be a voice for these people so that they're not forgotten. And that, yes, these ladies were found in these deplorable conditions even so long ago. We don't want to forget that these things happen. You know, just trying to raise awareness, maybe a bit of prevention there to stop people being put in these vulnerable positions that these things happen with. So that's why we do these cases. As always, guys, thank you also so much again for watching and for supporting me. It's very much appreciated. And as I always say, please stay safe, everybody. Don't put yourself in a position where you have where you're giving somebody the opportunity to do something to you that they shouldn't be doing. And just always be aware of your surroundings, and always be aware of, your surroundings when you're with other people. Everybody take care of each other. So until we meet again on my next video, I hope this video is interesting for you. Please consider dropping a like or a comment, because that also helps YouTube to notice me a little more and helps to push my videos out to a wider audience. So if you'd like to help me with that, that would be great. As always, though, I would like to ask you guys to please keep your comments respectful to me and to each other. And, if you haven't liked the video and you don't like the channel, just click off, go somewhere else that suits you better. That's fine as well. As always, take care, be safe, and I'll see you all again very soon. Bye.